Sarah's footsteps echoed through the dense woods as she led her friends deeper into the unknown. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the forest floor. Mark, Emily, and Jake followed closely behind, their excitement mingled with a tinge of apprehension. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Sarah?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Sarah flashed a mischievous grin over her shoulder. "Where's your sense of adventure, Em? We've been cooped up in this boring town for too long. It's time to explore." Mark chimed in, his tone filled with excitement. "Yeah, and who knows what we might find in that old abandoned house you mentioned." The group had heard rumors about the derelict house hidden deep in the woods. Some said it was haunted, others claimed it was cursed. But Sarah, always the thrill seeker, saw it as an opportunity for excitement. After what felt like hours of trudging through the undergrowth, they finally stumbled upon their destiny. A decrepit structure barely standing amidst the encroaching trees. Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement as she pushed open the creaking door, revealing a dimly lit interior choked with dust and cobwebs. "Whoa," Jake muttered, his voice tinged with awe. "This place gives me the creeps." But Sarah paid no heed, her gaze fixed on something in the corner of the room. She approached it cautiously, her heart pounding with anticipation. "What is it?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah reached out and picked up a dusty old box, its surface adorned with strange symbols and intricate designs. "It's a board game," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder, "but I've never seen anything like it before." Mark peered over her shoulder, his eyes widening with curiosity. "Let's play it," he said eagerly. Sarah hesitated for a moment, a sense of foreboding washing over her. But the thrill of the unknown was too strong to resist. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But let's make a pact. Whatever happens." The others nodded in agreement, their hearts pounding with excitement and fear. And with that, they opened the box and began to play. The old wooden table creaked as Sarah carefully laid out the contents of the mysterious board game. The dim light filtering through the dusty windows cast eerie shadows across the room, adding to the sense of unease that lingered in the air. Mark was the first to reach for the dice, his fingers trembling with excitement. "Let's see what this game's all about," he said, his voice echoing in the silence of the room. With a flick of his wrist, Mark rolled the dice, the sound of their clattering against the tabletop breaking the stillness. As the dice came to a stop, Sarah moved her game piece forward, her heart racing with anticipation. Suddenly, the air around them seemed to grow heavy, as if the very atmosphere of the room had shifted. "Did you guys feel that?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jake nodded, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "It feels like we're being watched." But Sarah dismissed their concerns with a nervous laugh. "It's just a game, guys. Nothing to worry about." Yet as they continued to play, strange things began to happen. Objects moved of their own accord. Strange whispers filled the air and shadows danced along the walls. "This isn't right," Emily said, her voice trembling with fear. "We need to stop." But Sarah was determined to press on, her curiosity outweighing her growing sense of unease. As they reached the end of the first round, they heard a low, guttural growl emanating from the darkness outside. The group froze, their hearts pounding in their chests as they exchanged nervous glances. "What was that?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could respond, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, causing them to shake violently. With a collective gasp, the group scrambled to their feet, their eyes wide with terror. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, his voice tinged with panic. But as they made a break for the door, they found it inexplicably locked, trapping them inside the ancient house. Panic surged through their veins as they realized they were not alone, and whatever malevolent force they had unleashed was now closing in on them. Trapped inside the ominous house, the group huddled together, their hearts pounding in their chests as they searched frantically for a way out. But every door remained stubbornly locked, sealing them inside with whatever unseen force lurked in the shadows. "We have to find a way to break out of here," Sarah urged, her voice trembling with fear. Mark nodded, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Maybe there's a key somewhere," he suggested, his voice barely audible over the sound of their racing hearts. With trembling hands, they began to search the room, their fingers probing every nook and cranny in search of an escape route. But as they searched, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something malevolent was lurking just beyond the reach of their senses. Suddenly, Emily's voice pierced the silence, her tone filled with dread. "Guys, look at that." They turned to see Emily standing in front of a faded tapestry, her finger tracing the outline of a hidden compartment. With bated breath, they watched as Emily pushed aside the tapestry, revealing a small alcove hidden behind. Inside, nestled among the dust and cobwebs, lay a weathered parchment, its surface adorned with strange symbols and arcane writings. "What is it?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah reached out and picked up the parchment, her hands trembling with trepidation. "It looks like some kind of rulebook," she said, her voice filled with awe. As they read through the ancient text, a sense of dread settled over them like a suffocating shroud. "This game. It's called the Devil's Game," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. They looked at each other in horror as the gravity of their situation began to sink in. According to the rules, they had unwittingly entered into a pact with a malevolent entity, and now they were playing for their very souls. "We have to stop playing," Emily said, her voice tinged with desperation. But Sarah shook her head, her eyes fixed on the parchment. "We can't. It says here that the only way to escape is to finish the game." With a sinking feeling in the pit of their stomachs, they realized they'd had no choice but to continue playing, to face whatever horrors awaited them as they traversed the twisted paths of the Devil's Game. With a heavy heart, the group resigned themselves to the grim reality of their situation. They gathered around the table once more, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across their faces as they prepared to continue the Devil's Game. Mark rolled the dice, the clatter echoing through the room like a death knell. With a sense of dread, they moved their game pieces forward, each step bringing them closer to their inevitable fate. As they progressed through the game, they encountered challenges that tested their morality, their courage, and their deepest fears. Sarah found herself faced with a choice between saving herself or sacrificing one of her friends. Her hands shook as she struggled to make a decision, torn between self-preservation and loyalty. Mark was tempted with promises of wealth and power, but the price of obtaining it was steep. He had to hurt others, to betray his friends and his own conscience, all for the sake of fleeting riches. Emily's challenge was the most terrifying of all. She was forced to confront her worst fear, to stare into the abyss of her own mind and confront the demons that lurked within. And Jake was confronted with a dark secret from his past, a sin he had buried deep within his soul. As he grappled with the weight of his guilt, he realized that the consequences of his actions were far greater than he had ever imagined. With each passing turn, the game grew more intense, the challenges more unforgiving. The air crackled with tension as they moved ever closer to the final showdown, where their fates would be decided once and for all. But as they reached the end of the game, they realized that their struggles were far from over. For the Devil's Game was not just a test of their morality, but a battle for their very souls. And as the final moments of the game approached, they knew that the choices they made would determine not only their own fates, but the fate of their eternal souls. As the group neared the end of the Devil's Game, a palpable sense of dread hung heavy in the air. Their hearts pounded in their chests, and every nerve in their bodies was on edge as they faced the final challenges that lay before them. With trembling hands, Sarah rolled the dice, the sound echoing through the tense silence of the room. The numbers on the dice seemed to mock them, taunting them with the inevitability of their fate. With each move of their game pieces, they felt the weight of their choices bearing down on them, the consequences of their actions closing in like a tightening noose. But as they approached the final space on the board, they were met with a sight that chilled them to the bone. Standing before them was a door, its surface etched with ancient symbols and runes that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "We have to go through that door," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Sarah hesitated, a sense of foreboding gnawing at her insides. "Are you sure about this?" Emily nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We have no choice. This is the only way out." With a deep breath, Sarah pushed open the door, revealing a darkness so thick it seemed to swallow the very light around them. As they stepped through the threshold, they found themselves in a vast, cavernous chamber, its walls lined with towering shelves filled with ancient tomes and forbidden artifacts. But what caught their attention the most was the figure standing at the center of the chamber. A cloaked figure shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "You have reached the final trial," the figure intoned, its voice echoing through the chamber like a funeral dirge. "To pass, you must make a choice." The group exchanged nervous glances, their hearts pounding in their chests as they waited for the figure to reveal their final challenge. "You must choose," the figure continued, "between your souls and the souls of others. Only one may leave this place alive." A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she realized the gravity of their situation. They were being asked to sacrifice everything they held dear to trade their own souls for the lives of others. But as they stood on the precipice of eternity, they knew that there was only one choice they could make. So with a steely resolve, they turned to face the figure, their voices ringing out in unison. "We choose to save ourselves." As their words echoed through the chamber, the cloaked figure let out a chilling laugh that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of their souls. "So be it," the figure intoned, its voice dripping with malice. "But know the price of your salvation will be steep." With a wave of its hand, the chamber began to tremble, the shelves of ancient tomes collapsing around them like a cascade of falling stars. Sarah, Mark, Emily, and Jake scrambled to dodge the falling debris, their hearts racing with fear as they fought to stay alive. But even as they dodged the crumbling walls and collapsing ceiling, they knew that their escape was not guaranteed. As they reached the entrance of the chamber, they found themselves face to face with the cloaked figure once more, its eyes burning with unholy fire. "You cannot escape your fate," the figure hissed, its voice a whisper in the darkness. "You may have saved yourselves for now, but the darkness will always find a way to claim its due." With a final burst of strength, Sarah lunged forward, her hands grasping for the door as she pulled it open with all her might. The group stumbled out of the chamber, the cool night air washing over them like a balm as they collapsed on the forest floor, their bodies bruised and battered but alive. For a moment, they lay there in silence, their breaths ragged and labored as they struggled to process the horrors they had just endured. But as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, they knew that their ordeal was finally over. "We did it," Emily said, her voice filled with disbelief. Mark nodded, a weary smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Yeah, we did." And as they lay there, bathed in the gentle light of the rising sun, they knew that they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. But deep down, they also knew that the scars of their ordeal would never truly heal, and that the memory of the devil's game would haunt them for the rest of their days. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the forest as Sarah, Mark, Emily, and Jake emerged from the woods, their bodies weary, but their spirits resilient. They walked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts as they made their way back to civilization. As they reached the edge of town, the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, illuminating the familiar streets with a warm, comforting glow. For a moment, they stood there, their eyes fixed on the town before them, a silent reminder of the horrors they had faced and the bonds that had been forged in the crucible of their shared ordeal. "We should go our separate ways," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "We can't let anyone else get hurt because of what we've been through." The others nodded in agreement, their hearts heavy with the weight of their decision. They knew that their lives would never be the same, that the memories of their time in the devil's game would haunt them forever. But as they prepared to part ways, a sense of camaraderie washed over them, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that would forever unite them. "We'll always have each other," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. And with that, they said their goodbyes, each disappearing into the bustling streets of the town, their paths diverging but their memories intertwined. As Sarah walked home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within her, that the darkness she had faced in the devil's game had left its mark on her soul. But as she opened the door to her house and stepped inside, she knew that she would face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and resilience. For she had survived the devil's game, and nothing would ever break her spirit again.